The October SAT is coming up quick. And regardless if you're taking the October SAT or you have an SAT that's coming up quick, let's make up a plan that you can target all of your weak points and actually get the biggest amount of score improvement over the shortest period of time if you only care about improving for the next SAT, right? This is not a total guide. As a result, it's going to skip a lot of the steps that it's going to take to increase your score fully to like in a long time frame. So, but if you only care about as quick as possible, this is perfect for you. All right, so hi, I'm Karthik. This is the last minute SAT plan to get at least a 1500. Okay, so the first idea is weak to strong. You already know that you should probably target your weakest sections, but the main idea behind this is it's actually different between section, what you should prioritize based on the time it takes to actually get good at that, right? You should target your weak sections overall, right, over the strongest because you're actually going to be able to improve the most on your weakest sections because it becomes easier to get sufficient versus getting like above sufficient, right? Above the average. It's easier to become average in a weaker section than it is to go way beyond, right? So it's going to take less effort to increase the same amount of points, and all points are effectively treated the same, whether they're from math or whether they're from reading, right? So what you're going to do is identify your weakest skills with the test score, right? But specifically, you're going to look at your raw score and see where you stack up in terms of section score, right? And on top of that, there's actually a huge difference for reading and grammar and math, right? If you're scoring lower in grammar and math and higher in reading, you should still focus on grammar and math. But even if you're scoring low on reading and higher in grammar and math, measure out that difference. If the difference is minimal, right, you should actually focus on grammar and math a bit more than you do in reading, because improving in reading in the short amount of time frame that you have is extremely difficult, right? It actually takes so much effort to see progress in reading. So I'm going to provide a specific strategy if reading is your weakest section point. But on top of that, you need to be focusing on grammar and math specifically, right? This is something that you should focus on because it requires skills. And there are also specific question types that you could be weak at versus strong on other questions that could also easily boost your score, right? So it's not just the section, but it's also the problem between. So I'm going to look at specifically the types of problems. So for grammar and math, what you need to do is stop caring about getting a certain problem type 100% right all the time, right? What you really care about is like this 90%, right? Where you're getting the problem like correct most of the time, and you don't really care that you're getting it wrong like every once in a while. And maybe that's due to a careless mistake, but the careless mistake shouldn't be blocking you significantly. Like it shouldn't be all the times that you get it wrong, right? So in terms of grammar and math, what you care about is getting right close to this accuracy rate that's really good. But on top of that, you're going to be focusing on the weakest accurate skill, right? So your score overall, let's say it's strong, but you have a really weak point in a certain type of math skill, right? Let's say it's like circle equations or it's like trigonometry, right? What you're going to do is practice that and learn it the best you can. Try to use all of your online resources, a tutor if you have one, right? Focus on learning it as much as possible, every single day. Focus on learning, right? And then test yourself periodically within the time. So try to test yourself. Maybe if you have 1 week left, maybe it's once a day you do like a short version of a section, right? Or maybe it's once every 2 days if you have 2 weeks, right? Or maybe you're doing it, twice a day if you have like 3 or 4 days left, right? Focus on testing, and then you're going to retest if you get that weakest accuracy. But also your accuracy numbers should primarily be made up of the practice that you're doing. So you learn the skill and you figure out the skill that you were lacking on, or the grammar rule that you didn't fully understand that you now understand. You're going to take practice questions. You're going to use the SAT Suite question bank, which is a group of questions that you can find online from all the released exams. And on top of that, you're going to use Khan Academy, not only for practice, but you can also use it for learning because it allows you to identify the specific skill, right? Instead of sorting through all of these problems and try to figure out which one is your skill, right? And you're going to test, learn, practice that learn, and retest it again to make sure that you got it, right? Because it's focusing on your weakest accuracy skill and getting that. Maybe it's at 50%, you get it up to 70, or maybe it was like 20% accurate and you get it up to 50, right? That is going to be much less effort to increase your points than focusing on like the section as a whole and mastering some few questions, right? Practice and learning are essential for grammar and math, and that's what you should be spending 80% of your time on doing for grammar and math specifically. Okay, so in terms of reading, right? This one is so hard to see changes in. It's so hard to see changes in because there's no explicit skill that you need to learn or practice in order to get good at it. The explicit skill that you need to get good for reading is the actual reading itself, right? It's analysis, right? So you need to get better at analyzing. And the way you get better at analyzing takes so much volume and takes so much effort, right? And it's just so difficult to see an improvement in the short time frame that you have. So what you're going to do to actually be able to see an improvement is you're not going to focus on sections or passages as a whole. You're going to focus on one question type. Either that's the main idea question, the evidence pair, or the word, or the definitions of the word, like this line, the word in this line most closely means, stuff like that. What you're going to do is actually focus on that, right? Focus on one type of question, and it has to be your weakest, right? The one that you get wrong the most often, right? And then you're going to focus all of your effort on increasing your ability on that type of question. And you can use Khan Academy for that. You can use the SAT Suite question bank is going to be the most powerful for that. But you're going to try to find those kinds of questions and just get good at them. And how are you going to get good at them, right? You're going to build a strategy, right? You're just going to maybe find one online. I have a bunch of videos explaining my strategies, but primarily what I talk about is that you need to figure out a strategy for yourself that works for yourself. So find something online as a baseline, try it, change the things up that don't work. You might be worse at it than what you're doing right now, because what you're doing right now, you have a lot of practice with. That's pretty normal. What you need to do is get practice with a better strategy, one that you think is better, that you believe in, that actually makes sense, that is better. And if all three of those things align, then you can start doing it. And basically what you really need to look for, right, is this strategy, is it working? Am I improving? Am I finding this easier or harder to do? And then just practice it repeatedly practice it as much as you can, because it takes so much effort to see an improvement in a reading score, right? And still, even if you're doing the strategy, you need to take full length sections, because you don't want to regress on your reading ability and your reading skill right before your SAT. So take full length exams, try to do as well as possible on them, and build strategies for these weak questions. Potentially you could move into a second skill, but you're probably not going to see significant improvement if you divide your time. You have to focus on one skill first. Okay. Careless mistakes are literally your biggest problem. And the reason why they're your biggest problem is you're going to know the skill. You're going to fully know the skill, but you're going to do a misread or something very stupid where you feel like you could have gotten it, but you just made this small mistake that had nothing to do with your ability on solving the problem, right? And that is going to make your knowledge instantly ineffective, nulling the points that you earned, right? So careless mistakes should actually be one of your biggest priorities in stopping this, right? So here's a full guide to stopping them, right? You're going to find the reason that you make them, right? And it might be something that you gloss over, like, oh, I just misread the question. I didn't read it fully and I started solving for something else. I started messing up the numbers. Like, I just made a simple mistake. And that is actually essential, right? Every time you make one of those careless mistakes, right? And it's essential that you grade it like close to when you've taken it, so you can fully remember exactly when you've done it, right? And what you're going to do, you're going to find a strategy to stop them, right? And this is going to be extremely personal. The strategy that you do, right? Here's some common mistakes, and I'm going to explain my strategies, right? If I misread it, right, and I find myself misreading on a certain type of problem, I start underlining specific information of that problem and repeat it to myself and write down the specific points that I need to solve for and that the given information on the paper, and it guarantees that I don't make that mistake. And once I get good enough at that, I just do it visually in my head, like a visual underline. Like, that's the point I need to pay attention to. This is the point I need to pay attention to. And then these are the points in my head that need to be in the problem, right? And messing up numbers and also explicitly writing them helps, but I've never really had a problem with this, so I can't really speak from experience. And didn't fully read. I also never really experienced this, but what I do for reading when I mess up the reads or I don't fully read or feel like not fully reading, I use my pencil and I go over every single individual word as I read it. And it makes sure that I read the whole thing and I read it concisely and I don't cut anything or go through anything too fast, right? Because the pencil is the guideline for my pace, right? So you're going to use one of those strategies or make up your own, right? It's actually not that difficult to do so. And you have to come up with this yourself. It has to be strong and actionable. And what I mean by that is all the strategies I said actively involve doing something or thinking something that changes the way you do something, right? And that sounds like a bunch of jargon, but basically it's actionable, that you actually do something, and it's strong. It actually changes the way you think, right? And that's the key for making these work, right? And you're going to start practicing problems with this new strategy. And if it starts working, you need to keep doing it and make sure that it keeps working. And if not, you make a small adjustment to your strategy that might help you, or you completely change it based on what you think is necessary, right? Because it's all on what you feel, right? Because that is going to be the biggest predictor here in terms of your strategy working, is do you think it's going to work? Okay. This really won't work unless you're willing to put all of the time you have available to prepare for this, right? It's not going to work unless, every single hour of the day that you have free, you're using like 80% of it, 90% of it to do this, and then 10%, just to relax and make sure you don't get burnt out completely. And, be focusing on these kinds of problems, right? Be focusing on the certain kinds of problems that are going to help you improve the fastest. And if you do this and put all the time that you have and you're confident that you've done that, this plan will work. But if you don't, it's going to fall short of an expectation that you had. And that's not really going to help either of us, right? So do you want help in order to get better, get consistent, be accountable, and also get one-on-one personal advice? You can either join my private community where I host lectures all the time and I'm able to give you one-on-one advice and you can ask questions, or join for SAT prep. The links are in the description. Thank you guys so much, and I hope you learned something today.